Doing well, I hope. Believe that? Don't worry, I'm just the warm-up act today. This is the real show. Hadosinim's going to share about his trip. If you haven't heard, he had a very big trip this weekend. Very important. And I'm like, when you go to the rock concert, I'm just the warm-up. So if you need to go to the restroom, you can go right now or get your drinks. You might not have heard of me, but approved of by the headliner, so you know it'll be okay. Shorter set, don't worry. Everybody doing okay today? A little gloomy out, but it was bright and beautiful earlier and beautiful a few days ago. It's that time of year. Rebirth. Everything starts to look green again. The leaves are emerging. The insects are emerging. And life is coming back to Michigan. I've been a little stressed out lately. A lot of work, but managing it pretty well, I think. The optimism of it, like if you work very hard, it'll all come back to you or it'll work out okay. That's a very fragile line to walk right there. It doesn't take a whole lot of things going wrong to tilt that the completely opposite way. No hope. One thing goes wrong and now everything's wrong. Everything's ruined. All that work that you put in. But I've been doing okay. We're going to, as the warm-up here, we're going to shake things up a little bit, and I'm going to ask you guys, what would you like to hear about today? Anybody have a topic? About Buddhism? Don't be afraid.
Well, I enjoyed your little introduction there with, things going wrong, but you're doing okay. How do you deal with things going wrong?
Well, you should already know that. Anybody else?
Things are going wrong right now.
Reincarnation. There's a good one. Reincarnation. You're going to be very impressed in a minute here. Now it's going to be like a magic show. Watch what happens. A few weeks ago, we had a very important service here where Josh Ando now took the precepts. And I've been through quite a few of those precept ceremonies. Every time we have one here at the temple for the last 10 to 15 years, however long I've been here, including my own precept ceremony, twice. Took the 5 precepts and then the 10 precepts, the Bodhisattva vows, when I became a Dharma teacher here. And every time I sit through the precept ceremony, it was very special to be here for yours, but also every time I've been through it for anybody else, it's like taking the precepts all over again. And anybody who has taken the precepts or who has seen the precepts or even knows what the precepts are, you probably understand why it's so important for somebody who would be a Buddhist or live a Buddhist type life to pay attention to those 5 rules. And honestly, I don't think about them every day. Does anybody here think about the precepts every day of their life? Probably not. At least not consciously. Maybe subconsciously a little bit, as I try to live a Buddhist life or try to live my Buddhist life. But having that, sitting through that precept ceremony a few weeks ago, reinvigorates that in me. And I take it more to heart, like I'm taking the precepts with Josh, with Ando over here. And teacher here gave a very good talk before bestowing those precepts on Ando about what a precept really is. And I feel like that's a very important concept. We're going to get to the reincarnation, don't worry. Because a precept is unique in that it's not a commandment. It's not a law, it's not a rule, and you're not going to get kicked out of the Buddhist Sangha for abusing one of these precepts. And as I told Josh before he took the precepts, Ando, before Ando probably knew this too, the precepts don't mean anything to anybody, to us, if they don't mean something to him, because he's the one taking that precept. And so understanding what it is to take a precept is a pretty important part of this whole process. Not just saying the words, but understanding what a precept is. And so we explain a precept something like this. It's not like a rule, but more like a lamppost, like a guiding light through the dark times. If you think of the precept, no, do not lie, no ill speech towards people, that can have a lot of meanings in a lot of different ways. And as we walk our daily lives, thinking about the precepts or not, we come into these situations with right speech and not, there's a lot of things that go on when we get into a situation where we have to watch our speech. A lot of things. One of them is we probably don't watch it. Just what comes out, comes out. But even in those times where we are very conscious of what we're talking about and where we're trying to be very careful, perhaps we're trying to settle down a situation, or perhaps we're trying to express a situation to make things better, or perhaps we're expressing bad things, trying not to make things worse. It's always very, very tough, not only to know what to do, but to know if what you did was the right thing or the wrong thing. Even when we do something that's right or wrong, we still want to know if we should do that again in the future. If we made a mistake. Constantly living in the past, right? One example that we use a lot when we talk about right speech, or this precept of using right speech, is the example of a hunter in the woods chasing a deer. And you're there in the woods and you see the deer hop on by, and then you look, you see the hunter come up to you and he asks, which way did the deer go? And you have this moral dilemma of, do you tell the hunter the truth and tell him that the deer went this way, and then the hunter goes and kills that deer, which perhaps you don't want that to happen, to preserve the deer's life, or do you lie to the hunter and say the deer went the other way? We can probably find examples of this in our lives too. Does everybody feel like they have an example of feeling two different choices and not knowing which one's the right one? They both seem kind of like bad choices. Perhaps every election you've ever voted in. The trolley problem, right? Famous problem. Well, I'm going to make it maybe more complicated and maybe more comforting to say there's probably even more than two answers that you could give to that question. And there's even a lack of answers that you could give to that question. So you might tell the hunter which way the deer went and felt like you said the truth, but you've caused some harm in this world. You might lie to the hunter and say the deer went the other way, maybe saving the deer's life, but now the hunter goes hungry. You might say, I'm not going to tell you which way the deer went. I'm sorry. It's against my moral code. And now the hunter goes hungry. And now the deer was actually infected with an infectious disease that's going to kill the whole deer population. And it's all on you because you made one choice. Or maybe you're silent. Maybe you don't say anything. Or maybe you say one thing. I took a vow of silence. Is that a lie? Maybe you took the vow right after you finished talking. I don't know. Needless to say, this is probably more relevant to the conversations we have in real life, because there's not just one answer or another answer. There's a multitude of answers. And as I think about those precepts and the precepts that I took, I'm constantly judging myself based on if I'm following those precepts, which has the connotation of being kind of unhealthy, constantly judging yourself, but also in this non-black and white world, something that we need to do, we need some kind of moral guidance to guide us along. And the unexamined life is not worth living. If we didn't worry about if we were following the precepts, it would be the same as never taking those precepts. So as we're living through these complicated lives, every situation that we have, we're constantly worried about the outcome of what we're doing. At least I think most people are, in most situations, that you're conscious of that. probably not as important, like this guidepost that we talk about, this guiding lamp, when things are going well. When I feel like I'm handling the stress pretty well. Not as important to me to think about these things, or at least that's how I feel. Things seem to be moving in the right direction. But so fragilely I walk this line, such a thin line to walk, that if I'm not conscious of it, things can quickly turn the other direction. When we chant the first chant today, it's in Korean, and a lot of people maybe never have looked at the translation, but there is meaning to the words that we're saying, paying homage to a lot of bodhisattvas and a lot of Buddhist ideas that we can take to heart. And one of them is this idea of Lord Indra's net, which is, let's say, mythos in Buddhist ideology. It's an idea of this large net full of jewels. You can think of like a fisherman's net. And every part where the nets cross, there's a beautiful jewel that reflects everything else in the universe. Super reflective, beautiful jewel. And this jewel reflects all of the other jewels that are in that net. And you can think of this many different ways, but let's just say everybody's a jewel in this net. And everybody is reflecting everybody else. Everything is reflecting everything else. This is the idea of interrelatedness, right, or interconnectedness. And I think this is important to our daily lives because as we have these complicated problems that we're constantly trying to judge between right and wrong, or even between many different options that we have, we're forgetting that this kind of dualistic task that we're taking on is fruitless. We're constantly looking for some kind of clarity because that's what gives us comfort, but it's an endless cycle. We would have to look through every jewel in that whole net, the reflection of everything that there is, and I don't think that our human life has enough time for that. Luckily, we have many, many lives to live through until we get it right. I got more. It's infinite. The options for what you could say to this hunter are infinite. The options for each of these steps that I'm going through in my life that stress me out are infinite. The next time that you have a problem, or the next time that you don't have a problem, but you're thinking, am I following the right path? And maybe that gives you a little anxiety. Does anybody have anxiety here at any time in their life? You can go down a spiral of thinking about, am I following the precepts? Is this the right thing to do? Did this person harm me? Should I be mad about this? Should I do this? Should I go there? Should I drink? Should I kill myself? Should I light something on fire? Should I crash my car or something terrible? Spirals can be as small and insignificant or as deep and hurting as you can imagine. So then what good are the precepts, right? If it just sends you down a spiral to try and follow them. Well, there's another chant that we do in the morning. It's called the Heart Sutra, and we do that one in English. And I would like to say, so it's easier to understand, right? But maybe not. Especially if you haven't dug into it before, because a lot of the things in the Heart Sutra seem almost the opposite of everything we teach here. Saying there is no enlightenment, there's no attainment, there's no eye, ear, nose, mouth, tongue, body, or mind. There is no suffering, and there's no cease to suffering. There's no path to lead out of it. So what is the sutra saying if it's saying there is none of these things? Well, let's try and simplify this super complicated issue here. We are so attached to maybe Buddhism or any idea that we have in our daily lives that it's part of our ego, that we think of it as this or not this. when we get to Buddhism, we kind of have a respite from the rest of our lives, right? We like to put faith in these precepts and in these teachings and in the idea of enlightenment and in the idea of a better life as long as I follow this path, which is a great way to get started on this path, but it is not the end. As we start to follow this path and we have faith in the path and we believe the teachings and we practice them and we hold on to them and we grasp them and we think that this teaching is the end of all teachings, we're now going to go astray as we become dualistic in a different sense. Before, we thought our lives were headed in one direction, and then we came to Buddhism, and now our lives are headed in another direction, where this thin, thin line, you could get knocked off of this tightrope right here and very easily crash again. And now Buddhism is the problem. And that path didn't work, so let's find another path and another path and another path. And all these paths keep leading us astray. And the way that the Buddha tried to teach this, to stop the constant cycle of death and rebirth that we have, is to teach you that this is the way, but this isn't the way. This is the path to follow, but it's not the path to follow. In our Tego order, there's two more sutras that are very important. The Flower Ornament Sutra and the Diamond Sutra. And just recently we did a class where we went through the Diamond Sutra. And one of the deep teachings in the Diamond Sutra is the same as the Heart Sutra right here. It says over and over again, the Buddhist path that we're following is the path to follow. But the Buddhist path is not the Buddhist path. And they're saying this in the way that they're trying to make you think about what we have in our mind is not what is reality. I realized by the stairs that I've gone too far with the twisting of words. Suffice to say, I'm not going to be able to express the sutra in its entirety for you right here. Let's try to make it simple again. And by trying to make it simple, I made it more complex. What we have in our minds, what we see, what we think is not the world. It's but foam in a river, tumbling over the rocks. It's a flash of lightning in the air. It's there and then it's gone. And if we attach to those ideas that we have, not only those ideas of our everyday lives of who we are, but those ideas of Buddhism, that what we understand is the teaching, and understand everybody in this room has a different idea of what the teaching is, of what the way is, to bring it back, of what the precept is. Everybody has a different idea and a different experience of that. If we hold on to that singular thought, then we're going to be led astray as well. Because having a thought about what a precept is, or having a thought about a teaching, or even multiple thoughts about what the right thing to do when that hunter comes by is still going to lead us astray, because none of those single things and none of the collection of those things is going to represent that entirety of the reflections in this net. The entirety of what this universe is, of what the Dharma is beyond what we can grasp in our single minds. We take just pieces of it and trying to make the best life that we can. And it takes a lot of lifetimes to redo that. This doesn't necessarily mean that your mind is going to come back. Reincarnation typically has the connotation that a soul comes back. Something that is you, right, that we can hold on to and we can say, oh yeah, this soul is getting better day by day, and I'm going to take this lifetime through lifetime, and I'll be back, suckers. That's not the idea that we have in our type of Buddhism here. Some types do. Think of it more as rebirth, not reincarnation. Rebirth of this karma that we're building, of these understandings, that times we come in touch with the Dharma, times that we grasp it, maybe sudden bursts of enlightenment, if you will, through our practice, through our meditations, as we get a better and better idea of what the precepts are, understanding that what we think they are is not actually what they are, but is just a piece of what they are. And understand that we can't grasp to the ideas that we have of the Dharma, because that closes us off to what the Dharma actually is, to the bigger part of the Dharma. If we go into these situations that might seem dualistic with that kind of a mindset, I would call that a very open mind. So open, exploded mind, right? Hugely open mind, not even grasping onto our own ideas of what an open mind is. Yeah, seems exhausting, right? If we go into those situations with an open mind like that, then we're actually going to let things like our true wisdom come out, our true goodness. And we won't have to think as much about what right speech is when we follow those precepts. It'll just happen. That's my belief. If you've ever seen somebody, like I look at my teacher very frequently, who you feel is very wise, very practiced. Some people look at the Dalai Lama that way. Some people know when they walk up to a great teacher, they just feel like a radiance coming from them. I don't think it's divine intervention. I don't think it's something in the water. I think it's simply the essence of that person practicing enough that they've let go of a lot of their ego, let go of a lot of what that person is. And the true wisdom is allowed to come out, the wisdom that we all have, the Buddha nature. Does anybody agree or disagree with that? Any part of that seem like off base? Any part of it seem unuseful? It's not an easy thing to do, but the good thing is if we're going into every situation with an open mind, we might not be following the precepts perfectly. We might not be happy with ourselves all the time. This isn't something we can change. But we will be open to learning. We will be open not to doing things in the same cycle. We will be changing, adapting to our situations here, living our life, living a true life. That's at least what makes me happy. That I may not be perfect now. That I may not be perfect ever. But that I'm working on it. And if you have a problem with that, you tell me. I would like to learn from that. I'm open to that. That's our set for right now. I'm going to pass the torch over to the main show. Give us a second to set up.